Marcus Sterling's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor. His knees buckled. His hands gripped the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles turned white. "No," he whispered. "This can't be happening." On the security monitor, the new maid was kneeling beside his paralyzed son's wheelchair. Her hand rested gently on the boy's cheek. And Ethan, his silent, broken Ethan, who hadn't smiled in 18 months, was laughing. Marcus had installed 47 cameras to catch her stealing, to catch her lying, to expose her as exactly what every other employee had been. But what he caught instead would bring a billionaire to his knees and shatter every wall he had spent 18 months building around his broken heart. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and comment below with the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. If you've ever believed that God sends people into our lives exactly when we need them most, this story is for you. The phone rang at 3:47 in the morning. Marcus Sterling would remember that exact time for the rest of his life. He had been lying awake staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, despite closing a $2 billion merger just hours earlier. His wife Claire lay beside him, her breathing soft and steady, her hand resting near his on the pillow. He should have been celebrating. Instead, something heavy sat in his chest, something he couldn't name. Then the phone screamed into the darkness. "Mr. Sterling." The voice was cold, professional. "This is Denver General Hospital. There's been an accident involving your wife and son. You need to come immediately." Marcus sat up so fast his vision blurred. "What happened? Are they okay?" "Sir, I can't discuss details over the phone. Please come to the emergency room as quickly as possible." The line went dead. "Marcus?" Claire's voice. But no Claire was in the hospital. Claire was. He looked down at the empty pillow beside him. When had she left? Where had she gone? Then he remembered. She had taken Ethan to his grandmother's house for the weekend. They were driving back tonight. They were supposed to be home by midnight. It was almost 4 a.m. Marcus didn't remember getting dressed, didn't remember running to his car, didn't remember the 30-minute drive through snow-covered mountain roads, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. What he remembered was bursting through the emergency room doors. What he remembered was the doctor's face. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Dr. Patterson. Please come with me." "Where's my wife? Where's my son?" The doctor's eyes dropped. "Sir, let's go somewhere private." "I don't want somewhere private." Marcus grabbed the man's coat. "I want to see my family." "Mr. Sterling." The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. "Your wife suffered severe internal injuries. We did everything we could, but the bleeding was too extensive. I'm so sorry. She didn't survive." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His legs gave out. A nurse rushed forward to catch him. "No!" His voice came out broken, unrecognizable. "No, that's not possible. We were just talking this morning. She called me from her mother's house. She said she loved me. She said she'd see me tonight." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling." "And Ethan?" Marcus could barely form the words. "My son. Where is my son?" The doctor hesitated. That hesitation was worse than any words. "Ethan is alive, but the impact caused significant damage to his spinal cord." Dr. Patterson paused. "He's paralyzed from the waist down. He will never walk again." Marcus sank to his knees right there in the hospital corridor, surrounded by strangers, and screamed. He screamed until his voice gave out. He screamed until security came. He screamed until a nurse sedated him. And when he woke up, Claire was still dead. Ethan was still paralyzed, and nothing would ever be the same again. That was 18 months ago. Now, Marcus Sterling lived behind walls. The mansion sat high in the Colorado Rockies, isolated from the world by miles of winding roads and thick pine forests. He had bought it for Claire 10 years ago when Ethan was just a baby. She had fallen in love with the view, the silence, the way the snow made everything look like a painting. Now, the silence felt like a tomb. Marcus had installed 47 cameras throughout the property, every hallway, every room, every entrance and exit. The security system had cost more than most people's houses, and he reviewed the footage himself every single night. His assistant Bradley thought he was paranoid. His therapist, the one he'd fired after 3 sessions, thought he had control issues. But Marcus knew the truth. The cameras weren't about security. They were about survival. Because in the 18 months since the accident, 11 employees had walked through his door. 11 people who had smiled, signed contracts, promised loyalty. And 11 times he had been betrayed. The first housekeeper, Maria, had seemed perfect. Warm, efficient, experienced. She lasted 6 weeks before Marcus discovered she'd been stealing Claire's jewelry piece by piece, hidden in her purse, sold to pawn shops in Denver. "I trusted you," Marcus had said, watching security footage of her slipping Claire's wedding earrings into her pocket. "I let you into my home." Maria had cried, begged, claimed she needed the money for her sick mother. Marcus had her arrested anyway. The second betrayal came from Thomas, a night nurse who was supposed to help with Ethan's physical therapy. Marcus caught him on camera taking photos of Ethan's medical equipment, the specialized wheelchair, the therapy machines, the lift system that helped move the boy from bed to chair. 2 days later, those photos appeared on a celebrity gossip website. Billionaire's son, the tragic life inside the mountain mansion. Marcus had sued the website into oblivion, but the damage was done. Ethan's face, his wheelchair, his private suffering splashed across the internet for strangers to consume. The third betrayal was the worst. Jennifer, a personal assistant who had worked for Marcus for almost a year, had access to his home office. She knew his passwords. She knew his routines. She knew when he slept and when he worked. One morning, Marcus woke to find $2.3 million missing from his accounts. Jennifer had vanished overnight along with his trust in humanity. After that, the cameras multiplied. The background checks deepened. The walls grew higher. And somewhere along the way, Marcus Sterling stopped being a father, a businessman, a human being. He became a warden, his own prison's architect. "Mr. Sterling." Marcus looked up from his laptop. Bradley Chen, his assistant of 5 years, and one of the only people he still tolerated, stood in the doorway of his office. "The new housekeeper is here. Should I send her in?" "Background check. Clean. No criminal record. No financial irregularities. No connections to media outlets. References verified from 3 previous employers, a retired judge in Montana, a widowed doctor in Wyoming, and a minister's family in Idaho." Marcus leaned back. "That's what you said about the last 11. Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, with respect, we've been through every reputable agency in the state. At some point we have to..." "Have to what?" Marcus's voice went cold. "Trust someone. The last person I trusted stole $2 million and disappeared. The one before that sold my son's photos to tabloids. And the one before that took jewelry that belonged to my dead wife." Bradley said nothing. "Send her in." The woman who walked through the door was nothing like Marcus expected. She appeared to be in her early 50s with gray-streaked brown hair, pulled back in a simple bun. Her face was weathered but kind, marked by smile lines around her eyes and mouth. She wore a plain brown coat that had clearly seen many winters, and she carried a single small suitcase. No designer bags, no expensive accessories, no attempt to impress. "Mr. Sterling." Her voice was soft but steady, like a stream running over smooth stones. "I'm Grace Mitchell. Thank you for this opportunity." Marcus didn't stand, didn't offer his hand. He simply studied her the way he had learned to study everyone, looking for the lie behind the smile, the agenda behind the politeness, the knife waiting to slide into his back. But Grace wasn't smiling. She was simply standing there, patient and calm, waiting for him to speak. "You understand the terms of employment?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Chen explained everything. "I'll explain it again. No personal calls while on the property. No visitors ever. No photographs of the house that grounds my son or anything else. You're not here to make friends or build relationships. You're here to work. Nothing more." Grace nodded once. "Understood. If I discover you've violated any of these rules, you'll be removed immediately. No second chances. No explanations. No excuses. Are we clear?" "Perfectly clear, Mr. Sterling." Her calm unnerved him. The others had nodded eagerly, smiled too, widely, agreed too quickly. This woman just stood there like a rock in a river, letting his words flow around her without disturbing her peace. "Why do you want this job?" Marcus asked suddenly. Grace tilted her head slightly. "Because I'm good at taking care of houses and the people in them." "That's not what I asked. I asked why. You're clearly experienced. You could work anywhere, easier places, less isolated, with employers who aren't—" He stopped himself. "With employers who aren't as difficult," Grace finished. There was no judgment in her voice, just simple honesty. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I read about your family's accident," Grace continued quietly. "Not in the tabloids, I don't read those, but I know what happened. And I know that grief does strange things to people. It makes us build walls. It makes us see enemies everywhere. It makes us so afraid of losing what's left that we forget to hold on to it." Marcus stared at her. "I'm not here to fix you or your son," Grace said. "I'm not here to offer sympathy or advice. I'm here because I know how to exist in a house where sorrow lives. I know how to move quietly, work gently, and wait." "Wait for what?" Grace met his eyes. "For healing. Or not. That's not up to me." Something shifted in Marcus's chest. Something uncomfortable. Something he hadn't felt in 18 months. Recognition. This woman understood, and that terrified him more than all the betrayals combined. "The house manager will show you to your quarters," he said finally, his voice harder than he intended. "Your duties begin tomorrow. Stay away from my son unless absolutely necessary. No reading to him. No playing games. No attempts at connection. He's been through enough without strangers trying to fix him." "Yes, sir." "And Miss Mitchell?" She paused at the door. "I'm watching. Every room. Every hallway. Every moment. Remember that." Grace looked at him over her shoulder. For a moment something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, not resentment, but something that looked almost like compassion. "I would expect nothing less from a man who's lost what you've lost." Then she was gone. That night, after the house fell silent, Marcus sat in his office, surrounded by the soft glow of security monitors. He had 6 screens, each divided into quadrants, showing every corner of his fortress. Kitchen empty, living room empty. Front entrance locked and still, back entrance locked and still. Guest hallway. He leaned forward. Grace was walking slowly down the corridor, carrying a folded blanket in her arms. Her footsteps were deliberate, careful, as if she understood that these floors had known too much pain. She didn't linger at the artwork, didn't pause at the expensive vases, didn't glance toward the master bedroom or the office where Marcus kept his safes. She simply walked. At 9:17 p.m., she stopped outside Ethan's door. Marcus's finger hovered over the Zoom button. Grace knocked softly, waited. No response came from inside. She knocked again, lighter this time. "Ethan, it's Grace, the new housekeeper. I just wanted to check if you need anything before I go to bed." Silence from the room. "I brought an extra blanket. The nights get cold up here in the mountains. I'll leave it on the chair by your door." Still nothing. Most people would have walked away. Every other employee had knocked once, heard nothing, and given up. But Grace didn't move. She simply stood there, her hand resting on the doorframe, her head slightly bowed. She was praying. Marcus recognized the posture from his childhood, from the church his grandmother had dragged him to every Sunday, from the faith he had abandoned the moment Claire died. After a full minute, Grace whispered, "Good night, Ethan. I'm here if you need anything." Then she placed the blanket gently on the chair and walked back to her room. Marcus rewound the footage and watched it again. Then again. Then a third time. He was looking for something, a glance that lingered too long, a hand that reached for something that wasn't hers, a crack in the performance. But there was nothing. Just a woman being kind. And somehow, that was worse. Because kindness in Marcus Sterling's world always had a price. The next morning, Marcus did something he rarely did anymore. He visited his son. Ethan's therapy room was the largest in the house, converted from what had once been Claire's art studio. The walls were painted soft gray, Ethan's choice after the accident. He had asked for all the colors to be removed, all the brightness, all the life. Marcus understood. He felt the same way. Ethan sat in his motorized wheelchair by the window, positioned so he could watch the snow fall over the valley. At 9 years old, he looked smaller than he should have been, fragile, somehow compressed, as if grief had stolen not just his legs, but his substance. "Morning, son." Ethan didn't turn around. "Did you sleep okay?" "Nothing. The nurse said you didn't eat much at breakfast. You need to try to—" "I'm not hungry." Ethan's voice was flat, empty, ancient. Marcus stood helplessly in the doorway. Every word he said felt wrong. Every attempt at comfort bounced off the invisible wall. His son had built a wall that mirrored his own. "I'll be in my office if you need me." He turned to leave and almost collided with Grace, who was carrying fresh towels down the hallway. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said politely. "Morning." He stepped past her, then stopped. Some instinct, some need to establish dominance, to remind her of the rules made him turn back. "Miss Mitchell." "Yes, sir." "I saw you outside my son's door last night." Grace's expression didn't change. "I wanted to make sure he was warm enough." "He has nurses for that. He has therapists for that. What he doesn't need is another stranger trying to fix him." "I wasn't trying to fix him," Grace said calmly. "I was trying to make sure he had a blanket." "That's not your job." "Then what is my job, Mr. Sterling?" Her voice remained gentle, but something in her eyes sharpened. "To clean floors and pretend your son doesn't exist, to walk past his door like he's furniture, to act like there isn't a little boy in that room who hasn't heard a kind word in months." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know anything about my son." "You're right, I don't. But I know what loneliness looks like. And I know that the people who say they're protecting us from pain are sometimes the ones keeping us trapped in it." The words hit Marcus like a slap. Before he could respond, Grace lowered her eyes and stepped around him. "Excuse me, sir. I have work to do." She walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the hallway, his heart pounding with something he couldn't name. Over the next week, Marcus watched Grace through the cameras with obsessive intensity. He woke up at 5 a.m. to review overnight footage. He skipped meals to track her movements in real time. He kept one monitor dedicated to wherever she was, whatever she was doing. Searching for the moment she would reveal her true nature. She cleaned. She cooked simple meals. She folded laundry with precision. She moved through the house like someone who understood that grief lived in the walls, that sorrow had seeped into the furniture, that every room held memories that could shatter a person if they weren't careful. And every day she walked past Ethan's door. She never went inside. She never violated Marcus's orders. But every single day, she slowed down as she passed. Sometimes she touched the doorframe just briefly. Sometimes her lips moved in what Marcus recognized as prayer. On the 5th day, she left something outside the door. Marcus zoomed in on the camera feed. It was a cup of hot chocolate steam rising in the cold air, placed on the small table beside Ethan's entrance. She didn't knock, didn't announce herself, just left it there and walked away. 2 hours later, Marcus checked the footage. The cup was empty. On the 6th day, she left a book. On the 7th day, she left a small stuffed bear, one Marcus recognized with a jolt. It had been on a shelf in Ethan's room untouched since the accident. Claire had given it to him for his 6th birthday. How had Grace gotten it? when he reviewed the footage obsessively and found his answer. She had entered the room during her regular cleaning rounds, dusted the shelves as required, and quietly slipped the bear into her apron. Then she'd cleaned it, mended a small tear in its ear, and left it outside his door. "Your friend was looking a little lonely," she had whispered, setting it down. "Thought he might like some fresh air." That night, Marcus checked the cameras outside Ethan's room. The bear was gone. He switched to the interior feed. Ethan was in bed, the bear clutched against his chest. Marcus stared at the screen for a long, long time. Something was happening in his house, something he hadn't authorized, something he couldn't control. And for the first time in 18 months, he didn't know if he wanted to stop it. The 8th day changed everything. Marcus was in his office reviewing quarterly reports that no longer seemed important when his phone buzzed. A notification from the security system motion detected in therapy room. He pulled up the feed. Grace was in the room. With Ethan. Marcus's hand shot toward his phone to call security, but something made him stop. Something in the image on the screen. Grace was sitting on the floor cross-legged a few feet away from Ethan's wheelchair, not close enough to crowd him, not far enough to seem distant, just present, and she was reading. Nobody thought he could do it. She read aloud, her voice gentle. The bear was too small, they said. Too young. Too different. But Little Bear didn't listen to what everyone else thought. He just looked up at that mountain and thought, "I'm going to try." Marcus slowly lowered his phone. So he started climbing. It was hard. His paws hurt. His legs got tired. Sometimes he slipped and fell all the way back down. But every time he fell, he got back up. And every time he got back up, he was a little bit stronger than before. She turned the page. One day a bigger bear saw him climbing and laughed. "You'll never make it," the bigger bear said. "That mountain is too high. You're too small. Give up now before you embarrass yourself." Grace's voice softened. But Little Bear just smiled and said, "Maybe I won't make it to the top. But at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll see how far I can go. And that's more than you'll ever know sitting there at the bottom too scared to even start." Silence. Then Marcus heard something that stopped his heart. A sound so small, so unexpected, that he almost missed it. Ethan laughed. Not a big laugh. Not a joyful one. Just a tiny breath of air, almost like a cough. But Marcus knew his son. He knew every sound that boy had made since the day he was born. That was a laugh. His son, his broken, silent, unreachable son, had laughed. Marcus stood frozen, watching the screen with tears streaming down his face that he didn't even notice. Grace closed the book gently. "That's enough for today. Same time tomorrow." And Ethan. Impossible, miraculous. Ethan nodded. He nodded. Marcus sank into his chair, his body shaking with something he couldn't name. Grief. Relief. Terror. Because this woman, this stranger, he had been so desperate to mistrust had done in 8 days what a year of therapists and nurses and his own helpless love had failed to do. She had reached his son. But instead of gratitude, Marcus felt fear, because hope for a man who had learned to expect nothing but loss was the most dangerous thing in the world. He picked up his phone. "Bradley, I need a deeper background check on Grace Mitchell. Everything. School records, hospital employment, previous addresses. Every job she's ever held, every place she's ever lived." "Sir, we already ran a comprehensive..." "Then run it again. Deeper. I want to know every secret she's hiding." "Is there a problem?" Marcus watched Grace on the screen, gently placing the book on Ethan's bedside table. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." The next morning, Marcus confronted Grace in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, humming something soft and low, her back to him. She didn't seem startled when he spoke. "You read to him yesterday." Grace kept washing. The book was on his shelf. He seemed interested. "I told you no storytelling, no games, no connection." "With respect, Mr. Sterling, it was just a book about a bear." "I didn't..." I don't care what it was about. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low and hard. I gave you specific instructions. You ignored them. Grace shut off the water and turned to face him, drying her hands on a towel. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held something Marcus couldn't read. You're right. I ignored them, and I'd do it again. Excuse me? Your son hasn't laughed in 18 months. He barely speaks, he barely eats, he barely exists, and you're angry because someone read him a story. Marcus's face flushed. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Grace's voice remained gentle but firm. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a father who's so afraid of losing his son that he's already lost him. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. You don't know anything about my fear, he said quietly, dangerously. No, Grace agreed. But I know what fear does. It builds walls. It installs cameras. It pushes away anyone who might actually help, because help means risk, and risk means the possibility of more pain. She stepped closer. Mr. Sterling, you have 47 cameras in this house. You've had 11 employees in 18 months. You run background checks that would satisfy the FBI. But with all that watching, all that control, all that protection, has your son gotten better? Marcus said nothing. Has he smiled? Has he laughed? Has he shown any sign that he still wants to be alive? Still nothing. I'm not here to replace his mother. I'm not here to fix what's broken. But I am here to remind a little boy that the world hasn't completely forgotten him. That someone sees him. That someone cares. And if that's a crime in this house, then you'll have to fire me, because I won't stop. She turned back to the sink. Marcus stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, his heart pounding with anger and shame and something else, something that felt terrifyingly like hope. My wife would have liked you, he said finally, his voice rough. Grace paused, her hands in the soapy water. She was like you. Marcus continued, the words coming out before he could stop them. Strong, stubborn, said exactly what she thought, even when I didn't want to hear it. Especially when I didn't want to hear it. He turned and walked toward the door, then stopped. Read to him again tomorrow, same time. He didn't see Grace's smile, but he felt something shift in the air. Something that almost felt like peace. Over the following week, the house began to change. It happened slowly, so slowly that Marcus almost didn't notice at first. But the silence, that heavy, suffocating silence that had pressed down on them for 18 months, began to lift. Grace read to Ethan every afternoon. She never pushed for conversation, never asked him questions about his feelings or his mother or his legs. She just read stories about bears climbing mountains and rabbits finding courage and boys who learned to fly. And Ethan listened. Then one day he spoke. Grace. Marcus was watching on the security feed, and he nearly fell out of his chair. Yes, sweetheart. Grace's voice was calm, as if Ethan speaking was the most normal thing in the world. Do you think the bear ever got scared? Grace considered the question. I think the bear got scared every single day. Then why did he keep climbing? Because being scared and giving up are two different things. You can be scared and still keep going. That's what courage is, being afraid and doing it anyway. Silence. Then Ethan said very quietly, I'm scared all the time. Grace's voice was gentle as morning light. I know, sweetheart. I know. I don't want to be scared anymore. Then don't be scared alone. That's the secret no one tells you about fear. It's so much smaller when you share it with someone else. Marcus sat in his office, tears streaming down his face, watching his son have the first real conversation he'd had since the accident. Something was healing. And for the first time in 18 months, Marcus let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. But he should have known better. Because just when light began to break through the darkness, the phone rang. It was Bradley. Sir, I found something in Grace Mitchell's background check. Marcus's blood ran cold. What is it? She worked as a nurse at St. Luke's Medical Center in Denver, night shift emergency room. The room tilted. St. Luke's. That was the hospital where Claire died. That was where they had told Marcus his wife was gone. That was where they had told him his son would never walk again. "Sir, are you there?" Marcus's voice came out as a whisper. "When did she work there?" Papers shuffling on the other end of the line. A pause that lasted a lifetime. According to her employment records, she was on duty the night of March 14th. March 14th, the night of the accident, the night Claire died. "Sir, there's more. I pulled the hospital's intake records for that night. Grace Mitchell was assigned to the emergency room. She was one of the nurses who worked on incoming trauma patients." Marcus couldn't breathe. "She was there, sir. The night your wife died. Grace Mitchell was there." The phone slipped from Marcus's fingers and clattered to the floor. He stared at the security monitor where Grace was sitting beside Ethan reading him a story about a little bear who was brave. She had been there. She had been at the hospital the night his world ended, and she had never said a word. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office until 3 a.m. watching every piece of footage he had of Grace Mitchell. Every movement, every glance, every moment she had spent near his son. His mind raced with questions that had no answers, accusations that had no proof, and a fear so deep it threatened to swallow him whole. She had been there. The night Claire died, Grace Mitchell had been working in the same emergency room where his wife took her last breath. She had walked those halls. She had seen the chaos. She had possibly even touched Claire's hand, or heard her voice, or watched the monitor's flatline. And she had come to his house 18 months later without saying a single word about it. Why? At 6 a.m., Marcus made a decision. He found Grace in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She looked up when he entered, and something in his face must have warned her because her hands stopped moving. "Mr. Sterling, is everything all right?" "St. Luke's Medical Center." His voice was ice. "You worked there." Grace's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, understanding, and something else, something that looked almost like relief. "Yes," she said quietly. "I did." "You were there the night of March 14th, the night of the accident." "Yes." "You knew." Marcus stepped closer, his voice shaking with rage he could barely contain. "You knew who I was. You knew about Claire. You knew about Ethan, and you walked into my house and said nothing." Grace set down the spatula she was holding. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I knew." "Why?" The word exploded out of Marcus like a gunshot. "Why would you do this? What do you want? Money, access, some kind of sick fascination with—" "I was with her." Marcus stopped. "I was with Claire." Grace continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "When she came out of surgery. When the doctors told her the internal bleeding was too severe. When she knew she wasn't going to make it." The room tilted. Marcus grabbed the counter to steady himself. "You're lying." "I'm not." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I held her hand, Mr. Sterling. I sat with her in those last minutes while you were in the waiting room, while the doctors were trying to figure out how to tell you. She wasn't alone. I made sure of that." Marcus's legs gave out. He sank onto a kitchen stool, his body suddenly too heavy to hold upright. "She talked about you," Grace continued. "She said your name over and over. She said she was sorry she couldn't wait for you. She said she loved you more than she ever told you." "Stop!" Marcus's voice cracked. "Please stop." "She talked about Ethan. She asked me if he was okay, and I lied. I told her he was fine. I told her he was asking for her. I didn't want her last moments to be filled with worry for her son." Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, but he didn't notice. He couldn't look away from Grace, couldn't stop listening, even though every word felt like a knife in his chest. "And then, she asked me something." Grace's voice broke. She grabbed my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers, and she said, Promise me you'll look after them. Promise me my boys won't be alone." The silence that followed was absolute. "I tried to tell her that wasn't possible," Grace whispered. "I tried to explain that I was just a nurse, that I couldn't promise something like that. But she kept saying it over and over. Promise me, promise me, promise me." And finally, I did. I promised her. Marcus looked up at her through his tears. "That was 18 months ago." "I know." "Why now? Why wait so long?" Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because I couldn't find you. You disappeared after the funeral, moved up here to the mountains, changed your phone numbers, hired security that wouldn't let anyone near you. It took me 14 months to track down where you lived and another 4 to figure out how to get close enough to keep my promise." "So you applied for a job." "It was the only way. Your background checks would have flagged any personal connection. I had to come in as a stranger, as someone with no history, no agenda. You lied to me. I omitted." Grace's voice was firm now. "There's a difference. I never lied about who I am or what I'm capable of. I just didn't tell you why I was really here." Marcus stood up abruptly, knocking the stool backward. "Get out." "Mr. Sterling, I said get out." His voice echoed through the kitchen. "You manipulated your way into my home. You got close to my son under false pretenses. You made him trust you, made him laugh, made him believe someone cared about him, and the whole time you were keeping this secret. Everything I did with Ethan was real." Grace's voice rose to match his. "Every story I read, every moment I spent with him, every word I said that was real. I didn't fake caring about your son. I care about him because his mother asked me to, because she loved him so much that her last words on this earth were about protecting him. I don't care why you did it. I care that you lied." "Then fire me!" Grace stepped toward him, her eyes blazing. "Call security. Have me removed. But before you do, ask yourself one question. In the 18 months since the accident, who else has made your son laugh? Who else has gotten him to talk? Who else has made him believe that life might still be worth living?" Marcus said nothing. "You've had therapists. You've had nurses. You've had specialists who charge $1,000 an hour. And none of them, not one, has reached him the way I have. Not because I'm special, not because I have some magic power, but because I made a promise to a dying woman and I intend to keep it." She grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. "I'll pack my things. I'll be gone within the hour. But when I leave, that little boy in there is going to ask where I went. And you're going to have to look him in the eye and explain why you sent away the only person who made him feel like he mattered." She walked out of the kitchen. Marcus stood alone, his hands shaking, his heart pounding, her words echoing in his head like a verdict. 20 minutes later, he was still standing there when Bradley appeared in the doorway. "Here, the housekeeper asked me to call a car. She says she's leaving." Marcus didn't respond. "Sir, should I arrange transportation?" "No." The word came out before Marcus could stop it. Bradley hesitated. "Sir." "Tell her to stay." Marcus's voice was rough, unfamiliar even to himself. "Tell her I need to think." "About what, sir?" "About everything. About what's right. About what Claire would have wanted." He looked at Bradley, and the younger man was startled by the raw pain in his eyes. "About whether I've been protecting my son or punishing him for surviving." Bradley nodded slowly and left. Marcus sank back onto the stool and buried his face in his hands. 3 hours later, he went to find Grace. She was in the guest room, her suitcase half packed, sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap. She looked up when he entered, but she didn't speak. She just waited the same way she had waited since the first day she arrived. "Tell me about her last moments," Marcus said quietly. Grace's eyes widened. "Mr. Sterling." "Tell me. I need to know. I've spent 18 months imagining what it was like, imagining her alone and scared and calling for me while I paced in a waiting room like a useless fool. I need to know the truth." Grace took a deep breath. "She wasn't alone. I told you that. I was with her from the moment she came out of surgery until—" Her voice caught. Until the end. Was she in pain? No. The doctors made sure of that. She was comfortable. She was peaceful mostly. But she was aware. She knew what was happening. Marcus sat down heavily on the chair across from her. What did she say? She talked about the two of you meeting, how you spilled coffee on her at some bookstore and spent the next hour apologizing, how you showed up the next day with flowers and a new copy of the book she'd been reading. Despite everything, a ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's face. She always said I was the clumsiest man she'd ever met. She said you were the kindest. Grace's voice softened. She said you never stopped trying to make her happy. Never stopped surprising her. Never stopped loving her even when things were hard. Things were never hard with Claire. She was the easy part of my life. She said the same thing about you. They sat in silence for a moment. She talked about Ethan. Grace continued. About the day he was born, how you cried harder than he did. About his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. She said he had your stubbornness and her heart. He does. Marcus's voice was thick. He won't give up on anything. Even now, even after everything, he still fights. He just fights quietly. She knew he would. That's why she made me promise. She said, my husband will blame himself. He'll build walls so high no one can reach him. And my son will disappear inside that fortress and no one will even notice. Marcus flinched. She asked me to find you, both of you. She asked me to remind you that grief isn't a fortress. It's a tunnel. You're not supposed to live there. You're supposed to walk through it and come out the other side. What if there is no other side? Grace leaned forward. There's always another side, Mr. Sterling. I've spent 30 years as a nurse. I've sat with hundreds of dying patients. I've held their hands and heard their last words and watched their families shatter. And I've learned one thing that I believe with my whole heart. What's that? Love doesn't die when people do. It just changes form. It becomes memories. It becomes promises. It becomes the way we treat each other after they're gone. She met his eyes. Claire's love is still here. It's in every laugh Ethan makes. It's in every story I read to him. It's in you, Mr. Sterling, even when you try to bury it under cameras and background checks and walls. Marcus looked away. I'll leave if you want me to, Grace said. I understand why you feel betrayed. I understand why you don't trust me. But before I go, I need you to know something. What? She forgave you, Claire. Before she died, she said she forgave you for not being there. She knew you would carry that guilt for the rest of your life, and she wanted me to tell you when the time was right that she forgave you. Marcus's composure shattered. He broke down sobbing, 18 months of suppressed grief pouring out of him in waves. He cried for Claire. He cried for Ethan. He cried for the man he used to be, and the hollow shell he had become. He cried until there was nothing left. And Grace sat with him, not touching, not speaking, just present. The way she had been present with Claire. The way she was present with Ethan. Just there. When his sobs finally subsided, Marcus looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Stay, he whispered. Grace nodded slowly. I don't trust you. I don't know if I can ever trust you. But Ethan needs you. And maybe, he swallowed hard. Maybe Claire knew what she was doing when she made you promise. She usually did. Yeah. Marcus managed a weak smile. She usually did. That afternoon, Marcus did something he hadn't done since the accident. He joined Ethan and Grace for story time. He didn't announce himself. Didn't make a grand entrance. He simply appeared in the doorway of the therapy room, hesitant and unsure. And when Ethan looked up at him with surprise, he asked quietly, Mind if I listen? Ethan stared at him for a long moment. Then he shrugged and turned back to Grace. It wasn't a warm welcome, but it wasn't a rejection either. And for Marcus Sterling, that was enough. Grace read about the little bear climbing the mountain, and Marcus sat in the corner watching his son listen with an attention he hadn't shown in 18 months. When she reached the part where the bear faced his biggest challenge, a storm that threatened to blow him off the mountainside, Ethan actually leaned forward in his wheelchair. "Does he make it?" Ethan asked. Grace smiled. "That's tomorrow's chapter." "That's not fair." "Life rarely is." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. It was the closest thing to joy Marcus had seen on his face since before the accident. After Grace left to start dinner, Marcus stayed behind. "Ethan." The boy turned his wheelchair to face his father. His expression was guarded protective. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. I know I've been distant. I know I've been more like a prison guard than a father." Ethan said nothing. "I was scared. After your mom died after the accident, I was so scared of losing you too that I forgot how to be there for you. I thought if I controlled everything, if I watched everything, if I kept everyone away, somehow I could keep you safe." "You can't keep anyone safe," Ethan said quietly. "Mom taught me that." Marcus flinched. "What do you mean?" "She always said that life is dangerous. That's what makes it precious. She said the worst thing you can do is stop living because you're afraid of dying." Marcus stared at his son. "When did she tell you that?" "The night before the accident." Ethan's voice was steady, but his hands trembled in his lap. "I was scared about starting at a new school. I didn't want to go. I told her I wanted to stay home where it was safe." He looked up at his father. "She said safe is just another word for empty. She said the best things in life, the things worth living for, are always a little scary. And then she told me she loved me and sent me to bed." Marcus sank to his knees beside the wheelchair. "The next morning," Ethan continued, "she woke me up early. She said we were going to Grandma's house. She seemed happy. She kept singing in the car. I remember. She called me from the road. She was singing some old song from the 80s. And then the truck came." Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "And she stopped singing." Marcus reached out and took his son's hand. For the first time in 18 months, Ethan didn't pull away. "I miss her," Ethan said. "I know. I miss her too. Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like, and then I feel guilty for forgetting. That's not guilt, son. That's grief. It plays tricks on us. But your mom's voice, it's still here. It's in the stories she used to tell you. It's in the songs she sang in the car. It's in everything she taught you about being brave." Ethan looked at him with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than 9. "Grace told me something yesterday. She said Mom asked her to look after us." Marcus nodded slowly. "She did. Is that why you're crying?" Marcus touched his face and realized his cheeks were wet. "I'm crying because I wasted 18 months being angry. I'm crying because I pushed away everyone who tried to help. And I'm crying because your mother, even in her last moments, was still trying to take care of us." Ethan squeezed his father's hand. "Dad." "Yeah, son. I don't want Grace to leave. She's not going anywhere." That night after Ethan fell asleep, Marcus went to Grace's room. He knocked softly on the door. When she opened it, she looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Sterling, is something wrong?" "I owe you an apology. A real one, not just words." Grace stepped aside to let him in. Her room was simple, neat, just as he had seen on the camera feeds, but something caught his eye that he hadn't noticed before. A small wooden box on the nightstand. "What's that?" he asked. Grace followed his gaze. For a moment she seemed to hesitate. Then she walked over and picked up the box. "Claire gave this to me," she said quietly, "the night she died." Marcus's heart stopped. Grace opened the box. Inside lay a silver locket, old but polished, the kind of jewelry that had been worn often and treasured deeply. "She was wearing it when they brought her into the ER," Grace explained. "When she knew she wasn't going to make it, she took it off and pressed it into my hand. She said, 'Give this to my husband. When the time is right, he'll understand.'" She held out the box to Marcus. His hands trembled as he took the locket. He recognized it immediately. It had belonged to Claire's grandmother, passed down through 3 generations. Claire had worn it on their wedding day. She had worn it in the hospital when Ethan was born. She had worn it every single day of their marriage. He opened it slowly. Inside were 2 photos. On the left, a picture of Claire and Marcus on their wedding day, young and hopeful and impossibly in love. On the right, a picture of baby Ethan, just hours old, tiny and perfect. And tucked behind the photos, a folded piece of paper. Marcus's hands shook as he unfolded it. Claire's handwriting. The same handwriting he had seen on birthday cards and love notes and grocery lists. The same handwriting that had made their life together feel real. The note read, "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably angry at the world. That's okay. Be angry, scream, cry, break things if you need to. But when you're done, remember this. I chose you. Every single day of our marriage, I chose you. And I need you to keep choosing too. Choose Ethan. Choose to be present. Choose to let people in even when it hurts. Choose to live, not just survive. Grace will help. I made her promise. Trust her. Not because she's perfect, but because I asked her to love what I'm leaving behind. That's all grief really is, Marcus. It's love with nowhere to go. So find somewhere to put it. Find a way to keep loving, even when I'm not there to love you back. I'll be waiting. Whenever you're ready, wherever we go next. All my love, forever and always, Claire." Marcus sank onto the edge of the bed, the letter clutched in his hands, tears streaming down his face. Claire had known. Even in her final moments, she had known exactly what he would do. She had known about the walls, the cameras, the fortress of isolation he would build. And she had planned for it. She had sent Grace, not as a nurse or a housekeeper or a stranger, but as a lifeline, a bridge back to the living, a reminder that love doesn't end when someone dies. "She knew me better than I know myself," Marcus whispered. Grace sat down beside him. "She loved you better than you love yourself too. That's what good wives do." Marcus looked at her through his tears. "Thank you for keeping your promise, for being there when she died, for finding us, for not giving up. I told you. I don't break promises, especially not ones made to dying mothers." They sat in silence for a long moment. "What happens now?" Marcus asked finally. "Now you grieve," Grace said simply. "Really grieve, not the angry, isolated kind, the kind that lets other people in, the kind that heals. And you'll stay, as long as you need me." Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at the locket in his hands, at his wife's handwriting, at the photos of the life he used to have. Then he stood up. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm taking down the cameras." Grace smiled. All 47 of them. Every single one. It was the first decision Marcus Sterling had made in 18 months that felt like moving forward instead of holding on. And somewhere he was almost certain Claire was smiling too. The next morning, Marcus kept his word. At 7 a.m., he called Bradley into his office and handed him a list. 47 items, 47 locations, 47 cameras that had watched every movement in his house for 18 months. "Take them all down," Marcus said. Bradley stared at the list, then at his employer. "Sir, are you sure these represent a significant security investment? If something were to happen..." Something already happened. Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "Something happened the moment I decided that watching was the same as protecting. I was wrong." Bradley hesitated. "What about the external cameras, the ones monitoring the property perimeter?" "Those can stay, but inside the house, I don't want a single lens. Not in the hallways, not in the living room, not anywhere near my son's room. This will take most of the day. Then get started." By noon, the security team had removed cameras from 17 rooms. Marcus watched them work, feeling something loosen in his chest with each lens that came down. For 18 months, he had believed that surveillance meant safety. Now he understood the truth. Surveillance meant distance. It meant watching life, instead of living it. It meant choosing fear over connection. At 1 p.m., Grace found him standing in the hallway outside Ethan's room. "The cameras are coming down," she observed. "Every single one." What changed? Marcus pulled Claire's letter from his pocket. He had read it 17 times since last night, memorizing every word, every curve of her handwriting. "She knew," he said. "Claire knew exactly what I would become. She knew I would hide behind walls and cameras and background checks. And she sent you to tear them down." Grace smiled softly. "She didn't send me to tear anything down, Mr. Sterling. She sent me to remind you what was worth building up." Before Marcus could respond, a sound came from Ethan's room, crying. Marcus's heart stopped. He pushed open the door without knocking. Ethan was in his wheelchair by the window, his small body shaking with sobs. The teddy bear Claire's bear was clutched against his chest. "Ethan!" Marcus rushed to his son's side. "What's wrong? What happened?" "I tried." Ethan's voice came out broken, desperate. "I tried to stand up. Grace said the bear climbed the mountain, even when everyone said he couldn't. So I tried." Marcus's throat tightened. "You tried to stand." "I pushed myself up from the chair. I thought maybe—" Another sob racked his body. "But my legs wouldn't work. They just hung there like they don't belong to me anymore. Like they're dead." Marcus knelt beside the wheelchair, his eyes level with his son's. "Ethan, listen to me. The doctor said I'd never walk again. You told me that. Everyone told me that. But Grace's story made me think maybe—" He couldn't finish. Grace appeared in the doorway, her face stricken. "Ethan, sweetheart, I never meant for you to—" "You said the bear kept climbing." Ethan's voice rose to a shout. "You said he didn't give up, even when everyone said he couldn't do it. But bears have working legs. Bears can actually climb. I can't do anything." He threw the teddy bear across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor, lying there like an accusation. Marcus didn't know what to say. For 18 months, he had avoided this moment, avoided talking about the paralysis, avoided acknowledging the permanence of his son's condition, avoided dealing with the rage that must have been building inside Ethan's small body since the accident. And now it was exploding. "I hate this chair," Ethan screamed. "I hate this room. I hate that Mom is dead and I can't even stand up to go visit her grave. I hate everything." Marcus grabbed his son's hands. "Ethan, why did she have to die? Why couldn't it have been me? At least she could walk. At least she could do things. I'm useless." "Don't say that." Marcus's voice cracked. "Don't ever say that. It's true. You barely even look at me anymore. You're always in your office watching your stupid cameras pretending I don't exist." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "That's not—" He stopped. Because his son was right. For 18 months he had watched Ethan through screens instead of being present. He had monitored his son's life instead of participating in it. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. "I'm so sorry, Ethan." "Sorry doesn't fix my legs." "No, it doesn't. Nothing will fix your legs. The doctors were right about that." Marcus took a deep breath. "But your legs aren't what made you special. They never were." Ethan looked at him, tears streaming down his face. "Your mom used to say that you had her heart. Do you remember that?" A small nod. "She meant it. You're brave like she was. Stubborn like she was. You feel everything so deeply just like she did. That's not in your legs, Ethan. That's in here." Marcus placed his hand over his son's chest. "And no accident, no wheelchair, no amount of unfairness can take that away from you." Ethan's lower lip trembled. "I just wanted to climb the mountain, like the bear. I know, but I can't even climb stairs." Marcus pulled his son into his arms, really pulled him, lifting him out of the wheelchair and holding him close. Ethan's legs dangled uselessly, but Marcus didn't care. He held his boy and let him cry, and for the first time in 18 months, he didn't try to fix anything or control anything. He just held on. Grace quietly picked up the teddy bear from the floor, brushed it off, and placed it on Ethan's bed. Then she slipped out of the room, leaving father and son alone. 20 minutes later, Ethan's sobs had subsided to hiccups. "Dad." "Yeah. I'm tired of being angry." "Me too, son. Me too." "Can Grace stay? Even though I yelled at her." "She's not going anywhere. Neither am I." Ethan pulled back and looked at his father with red-rimmed eyes. "Promise." Marcus thought about Claire's letter, about choosing to be present, about letting people in, even when it hurts. "I promise." That evening, something shifted in the Sterling household. For the first time since the accident, the three of them ate dinner together at the same table. Not Marcus in his office, not Ethan in his room, not Grace in the kitchen. Together. The conversation was awkward at first. Marcus didn't know how to talk to his son anymore, and Ethan was still embarrassed about his outburst. But Grace filled the silence with easy questions and gentle observations, slowly drawing them both out. "What was your favorite thing about school before the accident?" she asked Ethan. He shrugged. "I don't know. Art class, I guess. I used to draw a lot." "You drew pictures of dinosaurs," Marcus said suddenly. "You had a whole notebook full of them. Tyrannosaurus, velociraptors, triceratops. You knew all their names." Ethan looked surprised. "You remember that?" "Of course I remember. You used to show me every new drawing. You said you wanted to be a paleontologist when you grew up." "I thought you never paid attention." The words stung, but Marcus absorbed them. "I paid attention to everything. I just stopped showing it after—" He couldn't finish. "After Mom died." "Yeah, after Mom died." Silence fell over the table. "Mr. Sterling," Grace said gently, "I noticed there's an art supply store in town. Perhaps tomorrow we could pick up some sketchbooks and pencils." Ethan's eyes flickered with something that might have been interest. "I don't know if I can still draw. My hands shake sometimes." "Only one way to find out." The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 18 months. He drove into town with his son. The art supply store was small, family-owned, tucked between a coffee shop and a bookstore on Main Street. The owner, an elderly woman named Margaret, recognized Marcus immediately. "Mr. Sterling, we haven't seen you in goodness, it must be over a year." 18 months, Marcus said quietly. Margaret's eyes fell on Ethan in his wheelchair, and her expression softened. "And this must be Ethan. Your mother used to bring you in here when you were little. She always bought the biggest sketchbook she could find." Ethan's face changed at the mention of Claire. "She did?" "Oh, yes. She said you had an artist's soul. She was so proud of your drawings." Marcus watched his son's reaction. For 18 months, he had avoided talking about Claire, afraid that memories would only deepen the pain. But he was beginning to realize that avoiding her memory hadn't protected Ethan at all. It had only made him feel more alone. "We're looking for sketchbooks," Marcus said. "And pencils. The best you have." "Of course. Follow me." Margaret led them through the store, pointing out different supplies, explaining the differences between graphite grades and paper weights. Ethan listened with growing interest, asking questions, touching the pencils, running his fingers over the textured paper. "Can I get the big one?" he asked, pointing to a sketchbook the size of a small table. "You can get whatever you want." They left the store with bags full of supplies, sketchbooks, pencils, erasers, colored pencils, pastels. More art supplies than Ethan could use in a year. But Marcus didn't care about the money. He cared about the light in his son's eyes. A light he hadn't seen since before the accident. That afternoon, Ethan set up his new supplies at the dining room table and started to draw. His hands did shake, just as he had feared. His first lines were wobbly, uncertain. He crumpled up 3 sheets of paper before he managed to draw anything he was satisfied with. But he kept going. And slowly, hesitantly, a dinosaur began to take shape on the page. Marcus watched from the doorway, his heart full of something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. 2 days later, the physical therapist arrived for Ethan's weekly session. Dr. Sarah Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had been working with Ethan since he was released from the hospital. She had seen the worst of his despair, endured his silence, and never stopped pushing him to maintain what mobility he still had. "How are we feeling today?" she asked, wheeling Ethan into the therapy room. "Different." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "I don't know. Just different. Like, maybe things could be okay." She glanced at Marcus, who was hovering in the doorway. "And you, Mr. Sterling? You look different too." "I took down the cameras." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose higher. "All of them. Every single one." She smiled, something Marcus had never seen her do before. "Well then, maybe today is the day we try something new." "What do you mean?" Dr. Chen turned to Ethan. "I've been working with your father's medical team, looking at your latest scans and test results. There's something we've wanted to try, but we needed you in the right headspace. We needed you to want it." Ethan's face was cautious. "Want what?" "Your spinal cord injury is classified as incomplete. That means some neural pathways are still intact. With the right therapy, intensive, difficult, painful therapy, there's a small chance you could regain some function in your legs." The room went silent. "What kind of function?" Marcus's voice was barely audible. "We're not talking about running marathons, but standing. Maybe taking a few steps with assistance. It's not guaranteed, in fact, the odds are against it. But the possibility exists." Ethan stared at her. "Why didn't anyone tell me this before?" "Because before, you weren't ready to hear it. You were too deep in despair. This kind of therapy requires total commitment hours every day, pushing through pain, facing failure after failure. If your heart isn't in it, it won't work." And now, Dr. Chen looked at Grace, who had appeared silently behind Marcus. Then she looked back at Ethan. "Now something has changed. I don't know what, but I can see it in your eyes. You're ready to fight." Ethan's hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair. "What do I have to do?" "You have to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. You have to believe in yourself when every muscle in your body is screaming for you to stop. You have to fall down 100 times and get back up 101. "Like the bear," Ethan whispered. "Like the bear climbing the mountain." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Exactly like the bear," Dr. Chen said. "So what do you say?" "Are you ready to start climbing?" Ethan looked at his father, then at Grace, then back at the doctor. "I'm ready." The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Ethan's life. Every day at 8 a.m., Dr. Chen arrived with her team. For 4 hours they worked on Ethan's legs, stretching muscles that had atrophied, stimulating nerves that had gone dormant, forcing signals through pathways that had been damaged but not destroyed. The pain was excruciating. Ethan screamed, he cried, he begged them to stop. There were days when Marcus had to leave the room because he couldn't bear to watch his son suffer. But every day Ethan came back. Every day he pushed a little harder. Every day Grace read him stories about bears who didn't give up. On the 14th day, something happened. Ethan was lying on the therapy mat, electrodes attached to his legs, Dr. Chen manually manipulating his knee, while a machine stimulated his nerve endings. Marcus was watching from his usual spot by the door, his hands clenched into fists. "Come on, Ethan," Dr. Chen said. "I want you to try to move your foot. Just a twitch. Just anything." Ethan's face contorted with effort. Sweat ran down his forehead. His whole body trembled. Nothing. Again. He tried again. And again. And again. Nothing. "I can't," Ethan gasped. "I can't do it. It's not working." "It will work. Keep trying." "It's been 2 weeks. Nothing is happening. These things take time. I don't have time. I've been in this chair for 18 months. I'm tired of trying and failing and trying again. I'm tired of everyone telling me to keep going when there's nowhere to go. Marcus stepped forward. Ethan, leave me alone. The outburst seemed to drain the last of Ethan's energy. He collapsed back onto the mat, tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking with exhaustion and despair. Dr. Chen looked at Marcus. Her expression was professional, but he could see the concern in her eyes. Maybe we should take a break for today. No. The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Grace stood there holding a book in her hands, the same book she had been reading to Ethan since the beginning. The story of the little bear. Ethan, she said, walking slowly toward the mat. Do you remember what happened after the storm on the mountain? Ethan didn't answer. The bear wanted to give up. He was cold and tired and scared. He had been climbing for so long and the top still seemed impossibly far away. He sat down in the snow and told himself it was over. She knelt beside him. But then he looked down, and you know what he saw. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. What? He saw how far he had already come. He saw the valley below, tiny and distant. He saw all the obstacles he had already overcome, the rivers he had crossed, the cliffs. He had scaled the storms he had survived. And he realized something important. What? He realized that giving up now would mean all that effort was for nothing. It would mean those victories didn't matter. And they did matter, Ethan. Every single step mattered. Ethan looked at her with tear-filled eyes. You have been climbing for 18 months, Grace said. Every day you survived in that wheelchair was a step forward. Every night you went to bed without giving up was a victory. You have already come so far farther than most people ever will. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy looking up at the mountain. She took his hand. Look down, Ethan. Look at how far you've come, and then decide if you want to keep climbing. The room was silent. Then slowly, Ethan turned his head to look at his father. Dad? Yeah, son. I want to keep climbing. Marcus's vision blurred with tears. Then we'll climb together. Ethan took a deep breath. He closed his eyes. His face tightened with concentration, and his big toe moved. It was barely visible. A twitch so small that anyone who wasn't watching closely would have missed it. But Dr. Chen saw it. Marcus saw it. Grace saw it. And Ethan felt it. Did you see that? He gasped. Did you see it? I moved. I actually moved. Dr. Chen was already examining his foot, checking the monitors. Her professional composure cracking into a wide smile. That was you, Ethan. That was all you. Neural pathway activation on the right side. This is exactly what we've been working toward. Does this mean will I be able to? It means we keep going. It means we work even harder. It means the path exists, we just have to build it stronger. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed, a sound of pure joy that Marcus hadn't heard in 18 months. I moved my toe. Dad, did you see? I moved my toe. Marcus dropped to his knees beside his son and pulled him into a fierce hug. He was laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by a hope so powerful it felt like it might break him. I saw, he managed to say. I saw everything. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, exhausted but happy, the bear clutched against his chest. Marcus found Grace sitting alone on the back porch. He sat down beside her without speaking. For a few minutes, they just sat there, looking up at the stars. How did you know? Marcus finally asked. How did you know the right thing to say to him? Grace was quiet for a moment. I didn't know. I just remembered what your wife told me. What did she say? She said that Ethan was like a little bear, stubborn and brave and afraid all at the same time. She said he would face mountains that seemed impossible, and he would need someone to remind him of his own strength. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She really thought of everything. She loved him more than anything in this world. Mothers like that, they plan for every possibility. even the ones that break their hearts. Marcus looked at Grace. In the starlight, he could see the tears on her cheeks. "You've done what you promised," he said quietly. "You kept your word to Claire. If you wanted to leave now, I would understand." Grace shook her head. "The promise wasn't just for her. It was for me too." "What do you mean?" "When Claire died, something in me died too. I had held so many hands in that emergency room. I had watched so many people take their last breaths. But she was different. She looked at me like I was the answer to a prayer she hadn't even finished praying." Grace wiped her eyes. "After she died, I couldn't go back to the hospital. I couldn't face another patient, another family, another loss. I quit nursing. I moved to a small town in Montana. I tried to forget. But you couldn't." "No, because every night I dreamed about her. I heard her voice asking me to keep my promise. I saw her face peaceful and scared and hopeful all at the same time. And I knew that running away wouldn't bring me peace." She turned to look at Marcus. "Coming here wasn't just about keeping a promise to Claire. It was about finding a reason to keep living. Your son gave me that reason. You gave me that reason." Marcus didn't know what to say, so he did something he hadn't done in 18 months. He reached out and took her hand. They sat there together watching the stars, holding on to each other, and the fragile hope that tomorrow might be better than today. And somewhere Marcus was certain Claire was watching them too. 2 weeks later, Ethan stood up. Not alone. Not without support. Dr. Chen was on one side, Marcus on the other, both of them bearing most of his weight. But Ethan Sterling, who had been told he would never walk again, stood on his own 2 feet for the first time in 18 months. It lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then his legs gave out, and Marcus caught him before he could fall. But those 4 seconds changed everything. "I did it," Ethan breathed, his face flushed with triumph. "Dad, I did it. I actually stood up." "You did." Marcus's voice cracked. "You actually did." Grace stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, the little bear book clutched against her chest. "The bear reached the top of the mountain," she whispered to no one in particular. "He actually reached the top." That night, Marcus made a decision. He found Grace in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, humming the same soft tune she always hummed. "Grace," she turned. "Mr. Sterling. Marcus, please. After everything, I think we're past formalities." She smiled. "All right, Marcus." He took a deep breath. "I have something to ask you, and I need you to think about it before you answer." "What is it?" "Stay. Not as an employee. Not as a housekeeper. As family." Grace's eyes widened. "Ethan loves you. He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "I've come to depend on you in ways I never expected. And I think Claire would have wanted this. She would have wanted you to be part of our lives, not just as someone keeping a promise, but as someone who belongs here." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Say you'll stay. Not forever. I know I can't ask for forever. But for now. For as long as it feels right. For as long as we need each other." Grace looked at him, really looked the way Claire used to look, seeing past the walls and the fear and the carefully constructed defenses. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll stay." Marcus smiled. It was the first real smile that had crossed his face in 18 months. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Grace's eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. "I'm a terrible cook, I sing off key, and I have very strong opinions about how towels should be folded." Marcus laughed. "I think I can live with that." From down the hallway, a voice called out. "Dad! Grace! Can one of you come here?" They found Ethan in his room, sitting up in bed, the sketchbook open on his lap. He had been drawing for weeks now, filling page after page with dinosaurs and mountains and bears climbing impossible peaks. But the drawing he held up now was different. It was a family portrait. 3 figures stood together, a man, a woman, and a boy in a wheelchair. Behind them, barely visible, was a 4th figure. A woman with flowing hair and a gentle smile watching over them like a guardian angel. "I wanted to draw our family," Ethan said quietly. "The way it is now, and the way it will always be." Marcus took the drawing with trembling hands. "It's perfect," he whispered. "Do you think Mom would like it?" Marcus looked at the 4th figure, Claire, forever watching, forever present, forever loved. "I think she would love it." That night, Marcus hung the drawing in the living room, in the exact spot where the largest security camera used to be. A reminder of what they had lost, and what they had found. 3 months had passed since Ethan first stood up. The boy who had been told he would never walk again was now taking steps. Not many, not far, but steps nonetheless, real, actual, impossible steps that made Dr. Chen shake her head in disbelief every time she witnessed them. "I've been doing this for 20 years, she told Marcus one afternoon, watching Ethan shuffle across the therapy room with a walker. "I've seen miracles before, but this kid is something else." Marcus couldn't take his eyes off his son. "He gets it from his mother. He gets it from both of you. Stubbornness is genetic, and this family has it in spades." Ethan reached the end of the room, turned around with painstaking care, and started the journey back. His legs trembled, sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't stop. "6 more steps, Ethan," Grace called from her spot by the window. "You can do it." 7. Ethan grunted. "I'm doing 7 today." The goal was 6. "I changed the goal." Marcus laughed, a sound that had become increasingly common in the Sterling household. Definitely his mother's stubbornness. Ethan completed his 7th step and collapsed into his wheelchair, exhausted but triumphant. "Did you count? Was that 7? "That was 7, Dr. Chen confirmed. "And yesterday it was 5. You're improving faster than any of my projections." "Does that mean I can try without the walker soon?" Dr. Chen exchanged a look with Marcus. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You've made incredible progress, but your muscles still need time to rebuild. Pushing too hard could set you back." "But, Ethan," Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "Listen to your doctor. We've got time. There's no rush." Ethan's face fell, but he nodded. "Okay, but I'm doing 8 steps tomorrow." "I don't doubt it for a second." That evening after dinner, Marcus found Grace in Claire's old art studio. The room had been closed for 18 months, locked untouched, preserved like a shrine. But last week, Ethan had asked if he could use it for his drawings, and Marcus had finally found the courage to open the door. Now Grace stood in the center of the room, surrounded by Claire's unfinished paintings, her hand pressed against her heart. "I'm sorry," she said when she heard Marcus enter. "I shouldn't be in here without asking." "It's fine." Marcus walked to stand beside her. "I'm glad someone is using this space. Claire would have hated knowing it was sitting empty." Grace pointed to a canvas on the easel, a half-finished painting of the mountains at sunset. She was talented. She was brilliant. She never believed it, though. Always said she was just a hobbyist, not a real artist. Marcus touched the edge of the canvas. "I used to tell her she should have a gallery show. She always laughed and changed the subject. Some people create for joy, not recognition." "Yeah," that was Claire. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like. I try to remember, and it's like grabbing smoke. It slips away." Grace turned to look at him. "What do you remember most clearly?" Her laugh. She had this ridiculous laugh, too loud, kind of snorty. She was always embarrassed by it, but I loved it. It was the most honest sound I ever heard. Ethan has it too. When he really laughs, not the polite kind, but the real kind, it sounds just like that." Marcus smiled. "You noticed?" "I notice everything about that boy. He's become..." She stopped herself. "He's become what?" Grace hesitated. He's become like a son to me. I know that's not my place to say. I know I'm not his mother and never will be. But these past few months, watching him fight, watching him grow, I love him, Marcus. I love him like he's my own. Marcus reached out and took her hand. He loves you too. And I think Claire would be grateful for that. You think so? I know so. She didn't ask you to keep him at arm's length. She asked you to love what she was leaving behind. That's exactly what you've done. They stood there for a moment, hand in hand, surrounded by Claire's paintings and the ghost of the woman who had brought them together. Marcus. Yeah. What are we? The question hung in the air. Marcus had been asking himself the same thing for weeks. Grace was no longer an employee. She wasn't quite family. She was something in between, something new, something undefined. I don't know, he admitted, but I know I don't want you to leave, ever. Grace squeezed his hand. I'm not going anywhere. The next morning, everything changed. Marcus was in his office when Bradley knocked on the door, his face pale. Sir, there's someone at the gate. A woman. She says she's Claire's sister. Marcus's blood ran cold. Claire doesn't have a sister. That's what I told her. But she has documentation. Birth certificates, family photos. She's claiming Claire was adopted and they were separated as children. That's impossible. Claire would have told me. Sir, I don't know what to believe, but she's demanding to see Ethan. She says she has rights as a blood relative. Marcus was on his feet before Bradley finished speaking. Call our lawyers, now, and don't let that woman through the gate. He found Grace in the therapy room with Ethan helping him with his stretching exercises. We have a problem, Marcus said quietly, pulling Grace aside. Someone is at the gate claiming to be Claire's sister. Grace's face went pale. Claire told me she was an only child. So did she tell me, but apparently there's documentation, photos. Bradley seems to think it might be legitimate. What does she want? To see Ethan. She's claiming rights as a blood relative. Grace's expression hardened. She doesn't have any rights. She wasn't here for 18 months while that boy suffered. She doesn't get to walk in now and claim family. I agree, but if she really is Claire's biological sister, this could get complicated legally. Dad? Ethan had stopped his exercises and was watching them with worried eyes. What's going on? Marcus forced a smile. Nothing, son. Just some business stuff. You're lying. I can tell. Marcus sighed. His son had always been too perceptive for his own good. There's a woman at the gate. She says she's your mother's sister. Ethan's face went blank. Mom didn't have a sister. She told me her family was small. Just her and Grandma. I know. That's why we're being careful. Is she going to try to take me away? The fear in Ethan's voice broke Marcus's heart. No one is taking you anywhere. I promise you that. But even as he said the words, Marcus felt a knot of dread forming in his stomach. Because the law didn't always care about promises, and blood relatives in custody cases often had more rights than anyone wanted to admit. The woman's name was Victoria Wells. She arrived at the house 2 hours later, accompanied by a lawyer and a stack of documents thick enough to make Marcus's legal team nervous. I know this must be shocking, Victoria said, sitting across from Marcus in his office. It was shocking for me too when I first learned the truth. And when was that? 2 years ago. I was going through my mother's belongings after she passed, and I found adoption papers. Claire and I were born to the same mother, but we were separated when I was 3 and she was an infant. Different adoptive families. Different lives. And you expect me to believe that Claire never knew about this? I don't expect you to believe anything. That's why I brought the documentation. Victoria pushed a folder across the desk. DNA results, birth certificates, hospital records from the day we were born. It's all there. Marcus didn't touch the folder. If this is true, why didn't you reach out to Claire when she was alive? I tried. I contacted her adoption agency, but they said she didn't want to be found. She had asked them to seal her records, so I respected her wishes and kept my distance. Then why are you here now? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Because my nephew is the only family I have left. Because I've spent 2 years watching from afar, reading about the accident, seeing photos of that little boy in a wheelchair. And I couldn't stay away anymore. Stay away from what exactly? What do you want? I want to know him. I want to be part of his life. Not to replace his mother. I know I can never do that. But to be an aunt. A connection to Claire. A link to the family he never knew existed. Marcus studied her face, looking for the lie, the agenda, the hidden motive. But all he saw was grief. The same grief he saw in the mirror every morning. I need to verify all of this, he said finally. DNA tests, background checks, everything. I expected that. I'll submit to whatever you require. And until then, you don't come near my son. Victoria nodded slowly. That's fair. But Marcus, can I ask you something? What? Does he know anything about Claire's past? About where she came from? Marcus hesitated. The truth was, Claire had always been private about her childhood. She'd said her parents died when she was young, that she'd been raised by relatives who were now gone. She'd never mentioned adoption, never hinted at a sister. He knows what she told him, Marcus said carefully, which apparently wasn't the whole truth. Claire had her reasons for keeping secrets. Our birth mother was not a good person. The circumstances of our separation were... Victoria stopped. That's a conversation for another time, if ever. She stood up. I'll wait for your verification, but please don't shut me out completely. I've spent 2 years grieving a sister I never got to meet. Ethan is all I have left of her. After Victoria left, Marcus sat alone in his office for an hour. His mind was spinning. Claire had kept secrets. His wife, his partner, the woman he thought he knew better than anyone, she had hidden an entire family from him. Why? What had happened in her past that was so terrible, she couldn't share it with the man she loved? And what did it mean for Ethan? He found Grace in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up when he entered, her face full of questions. Well, she might be telling the truth. Marcus sank into a chair. The documents looked legitimate. She agreed to DNA testing, and she knew things about Claire that she couldn't have found in any public record. What kind of things? A birthmark on her left shoulder blade, the fact that she was allergic to strawberries, that she used to hum when she was nervous. Marcus shook his head. Either Victoria really is Claire's sister, or she's the most thorough stalker in history. What are you going to tell Ethan? I don't know, he's already been through so much. Finding out his mother had secrets, that there's an aunt he never knew about, it might be too much. Or it might be exactly what he needs. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean? Ethan has been learning to walk again. He's been learning to hope again. Part of that journey is learning about who he is, his family, his history, where he comes from. Grace sat down across from him. If Victoria really is Claire's sister, she might have answers, stories, photographs, things that could help Ethan understand his mother in ways none of us can provide. Or she could be lying. She could want money, access, control. She could, Grace agreed. But you'll know soon enough. And if she's genuine, Marcus, think about what that would mean for your son. Another person who loves him. Another connection to Claire. Another reason to believe that family isn't just about the people under this roof. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When did you get so wise? I spent 30 years holding the hands of dying people. You learn a few things about what really matters. The DNA results came back 4 days later. Marcus sat in his office staring at the paper in his hands. The words blurred together, but the conclusion was clear. Victoria Wells was a 99.97% genetic match to be Claire's full biological sibling. She was telling the truth. Claire had a sister. Ethan had an aunt. And everything Marcus thought he knew about his wife had just been turned upside down. He called Victoria that afternoon. The results came back. You're her sister. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, I knew. I've always known in my heart, but thank you for confirming it. I have questions. A lot of questions. I'll answer whatever I can. Not over the phone. I want you to come to the house. I want Ethan to meet you. And I want you to tell us everything about Claire's birth family, about why she kept this secret, about all of it. Victoria's voice caught. Are you sure? No. But my son deserves to know where he comes from. And I deserve to understand the woman I married. Claire kept this from me for 12 years. I need to know why. I'll be there tomorrow. One more thing, Victoria. Yes. If you hurt my son, if any of this turns out to be some kind of scheme or manipulation, I will destroy you. Legally, financially, personally. Do you understand? I understand. But Marcus... What? Claire would never have married a man who didn't protect her child. I'm glad you're exactly who I hoped you'd be. The next afternoon, Victoria arrived at the house. Ethan was waiting in the living room, his wheelchair positioned near the couch where Marcus and Grace sat. He had demanded to be included in the conversation, and Marcus hadn't had the heart to refuse. Hi, Ethan, Victoria said softly, kneeling down to meet his eye level. I'm Victoria. I know this must be confusing. Mom never mentioned you. Ethan's voice was guarded. I know, and I'm going to try to explain why. Victoria glanced at Marcus. May I sit? Go ahead. Victoria took a seat across from them. For a moment, she just looked at Ethan, her eyes drinking in every detail of his face. You look like her, she whispered. You have her eyes, her chin, the way she used to tilt her head when she was thinking you do the same thing. Ethan's defenses cracked slightly. I do. Exactly the same. It's like seeing her ghost. Tell us about the family, Marcus said. Start from the beginning. Victoria took a deep breath. Our mother's name was Eleanor. She was young when she had us, 17 when Claire was born, 15 when she had me. Our father was not a good man. He was abusive, addictive, violent. When Claire was 6 months old, the state took us both away. And you were separated. Different foster homes, different adoptive families. I was 3 old enough to have some memories, but young enough that they faded quickly. Claire was just a baby. She never knew me at all. Grace leaned forward. Why didn't Claire's adoptive parents tell her she had a sister? I don't know for certain, but I suspect they wanted to give her a clean start. Our birth mother was involved in things, drugs, crime, worse. Maybe they thought it was kinder to let Claire believe she was an only child. But she found out, Marcus said. At some point she must have found out. Otherwise, why would she have asked the adoption agency to seal her records? Victoria nodded slowly. She did find out. When she was 18, she contacted the agency just like I did later. She was looking for her birth parents. And what did she find? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. She found out that our mother had died of an overdose when Claire was 12. She found out that our father was in prison for murder. And she found out that she had a sister who had been placed in a psychiatric facility at age 16. The room went silent. Psychiatric facility. Marcus's voice was barely audible. I struggled. After leaving foster care, I had nobody. I made bad choices. I fell apart. Victoria's eyes were full of shame. I spent 3 years in treatment for severe depression and trauma. By the time I was stable again, Claire had already moved on. She had a life, a career, a man she was going to marry. She looked at Marcus. I think she was afraid. Afraid that if she reached out, her past would contaminate her future. Marcus felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath him. She never told me any of this. Would you have judged her? Of course not. But she didn't know that. Not for certain. She loved you so much, Marcus. She was terrified of losing you. And she thought... Victoria's voice broke. She thought if you knew where she came from, you might see her differently. Ethan spoke up, his young voice cutting through the tension. Did she know you were looking for her? Victoria turned to him. I sent a letter once through the adoption agency. I told her I was her sister, that I was healthy now, that I just wanted to talk. But she never responded. Maybe she didn't get it. Maybe. Or maybe she wasn't ready. I don't blame her, Ethan. Our past was painful. Sometimes the only way to survive pain is to leave it behind. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and took Victoria's hand. I'm glad you came. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You are... Mom always said that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up when people need you. He looked at Grace, then at his father. You showed up. That makes you family. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. His son, his brave, stubborn, impossible son, had just done something he himself had been unable to do. He had opened the door. Over the following weeks, Victoria became a regular presence in the Sterling household. She brought photo albums from her own childhood, faded images that showed glimpses of a life Claire had never known about. She told stories about their birth mother, carefully edited to protect Ethan from the worst details, but honest enough to give him a sense of where he came from. And she watched in amazement as Ethan continued to defy every medical expectation. On a Thursday afternoon in late spring, 6 months after Grace had first walked through the door, Ethan achieved the impossible. He took his first unassisted steps. No walker, no support. Just Ethan standing at one end of the therapy room and his father kneeling at the other end with his arms outstretched. You can do this, Marcus said. I know you can. What if I fall? Then I'll catch you. I'll always catch you. Ethan took a breath. His legs were trembling. His entire body was shaking with the effort of standing unsupported. And then he took a step, and another, and another. 3 steps, 4, 5. He was halfway across the room. Grace was crying. Victoria was covering her mouth with both hands. Dr. Chen was furiously taking notes, her professional composure completely shattered. 6 steps, 7. Ethan's face was a mask of concentration. Every muscle in his body was screaming, but he refused to stop. 8 steps. He stumbled. His balance wavered. For one terrible moment, it looked like he would fall. But he didn't. He steadied himself, took a breath, and took 2 more steps, right into his father's arms. Marcus caught him, lifted him, held him so tightly that neither of them could breathe. They were both crying, father and son, bound together by grief and hope and the impossible miracle of this moment. You did it, Marcus sobbed. You actually did it. I told you, Ethan gasped. I'm climbing the mountain, like the bear. Like the bear. Grace crossed the room and wrapped her arms around both of them. Victoria joined a moment later. Dr. Chen abandoned her notes and added herself to the embrace. 5 people, 1 family, bound together not by blood alone, but by something far stronger. Love. That night after Ethan fell asleep, Marcus found Grace on the back porch, looking up at the stars. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over, he said, sitting down beside her. I thought I would spend the rest of my days behind cameras and walls watching the world from a distance, waiting to die. Grace took his hand. And now? Now I can't imagine going back to that darkness. Not after everything we've been through. Not after everything you've given us. Grace turned to face him. I didn't give you anything, Marcus. I just reminded you of what you already had. You gave me hope. You gave Ethan his laugh back. You gave both of us a reason to keep going. Claire gave you that. I just delivered the message. Marcus shook his head. It was more than that, and you know it. Claire sent you here, but you chose to stay. You chose to love us, even when we made it difficult. Even when I pushed you away. Grace smiled. You did push pretty hard. I'm sorry, for all of it. For the suspicion, the surveillance, the accusations. You deserved better. Oh. You were protecting your son. I understood that, even when it hurt. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out Claire's locket, the one Grace had kept for 18 months, the one that had started everything. I want you to have this back, he said. Grace's eyes widened. Marcus, I couldn't. Claire gave it to you. She trusted you with it. And now I'm trusting you with something more. What? Marcus took both her hands in his. Us, me and Ethan. We're not easy. We're damaged and stubborn and probably going to drive you crazy. But we love you, Grace. Both of us. And if you'll have us, if you're willing to keep climbing this mountain with us, we want you to stay forever. Tears streamed down Grace's face. Are you asking me what I think you're asking? I don't know what I'm asking exactly. I just know that when I imagine the future, you're in it. Every version, every possibility. I can't picture a life without you anymore. Grace pressed the locket against her heart. The same locket that had carried Claire's hope across 18 months of darkness. The same locket that had brought a stranger into a broken home and turned her into family. Yes, she whispered. Whatever you're asking, yes. Marcus pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in 2 years he felt whole. The cameras were gone, the walls had come down. And in their place stood something far more powerful. A family. Rebuilt from ruins, bound by love, ready to face whatever came next. 1 year later, the Sterling mansion looked nothing like it had before. The cameras were gone, all 47 of them, replaced by windows that let in light and doors that stayed unlocked. The security team had been reduced to a single guard at the main gate, and even he spent most of his time chatting with delivery drivers rather than monitoring threats. But the biggest change wasn't visible from the outside. The biggest change was inside. Marcus Sterling woke up on a Saturday morning to the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. Not the polite, restrained laughter of guests trying to be appropriate. Real laughter, loud, messy, the kind that comes from deep in the belly and doesn't care who hears it. He found the source in the kitchen. Ethan was standing at the counter, standing on his own 2 legs, with only a cane for support, while Grace attempted to flip a pancake and failed spectacularly. The pancake had landed half on the stove and half on the floor, and Victoria was doubled over with laughter while trying to clean up the mess. I told you to wait for it to bubble, Victoria gasped between laughs. It was bubbling, not enough. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching the chaos with a smile he couldn't have imagined wearing 2 years ago. Is there any breakfast left? Or did the floor eat it all? Ethan turned to his father, his face bright with joy. Dad, Grace is trying to kill us with her cooking again. I am not trying to kill anyone. The pancake was just sentient, Victoria offered, trying to escape. Ambitious? Grace finished. It was an ambitious pancake. Marcus crossed the kitchen and kissed Grace on the cheek. Maybe we should stick to cereal. Absolutely not. I will conquer this pancake or die trying. Those might be the same thing, Ethan muttered, earning a playful swat with the spatula. This was what healing looked like. Not a single dramatic moment, but 1,000 small ones. Burned pancakes, bad jokes. The sound of laughter in a house that had been silent for too long. Marcus thought about the man he had been 2 years ago, isolated, paranoid, watching his son through camera lenses instead of being present. That man felt like a stranger now, a ghost from a past life. Dad? Marcus looked up. Ethan was watching him with an expression that was far too perceptive for an 11-year-old. You okay? I'm better than okay, son. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ethan smiled that brilliant, impossible smile that Claire used to wear. Good. Because I have something I want to show you today. What is it? It's a surprise. But you have to come to the therapy room at noon, all of you. Marcus exchanged glances with Grace and Victoria. Should we be worried? Probably, Ethan grinned. But that's half the fun. At exactly noon, Marcus, Grace, and Victoria gathered in the therapy room. Dr. Chen was there too, along with Bradley and several members of the household staff. Ethan had insisted on an audience, which immediately made Marcus nervous. "What's going on?" Marcus asked. "Why all the secrecy?" "Because you would have tried to stop me if I told you." "Tried to stop you from doing what?" Ethan positioned himself at one end of the room, his cane in hand. But something was different about his stance. He was holding the cane loosely, almost casually, as if it wasn't really supporting his weight. "Dr. Chen," Ethan said, "tell them what we've been working on." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her face barely containing her excitement. "For the past 3 months, Ethan has been practicing something in secret. He wanted to surprise you all." "Practicing what?" Grace's voice was tight with concern. "Walking. Without the cane." Marcus's heart stopped. "That's too dangerous. His balance isn't—" "His balance is fine," Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "It's been fine for weeks. He's been ready for this for longer than any of us realized." Ethan set his cane against the wall. He stood there for a moment, unsupported, his legs steady beneath him. "I've been waiting for the right moment to do this," he said, "and I decided today is the day." "Ethan," Marcus started forward, but Grace grabbed his arm. "Let him try," she whispered. "He needs this." Ethan took a deep breath. His eyes found his father's. "Mom used to say that the bravest thing you can do is take the first step when you don't know if you'll fall. So here goes." He stepped forward. No cane, no walker, no support. Just Ethan. 1 step, 2, 3. The room was absolutely silent. Everyone was holding their breath. 4 steps. 5, 6. Ethan's face was a mask of concentration, but his legs were steady. His balance was perfect. 7, 8, 9. He was halfway across the room now, walking toward his father with the confidence of a boy who had climbed an impossible mountain and refused to stop. 10, 11, 12. Marcus's vision blurred with tears. He wanted to rush forward to catch his son to protect him from falling. But he stayed still because Ethan didn't need protection anymore. He needed trust. 13, 14, 15. Ethan stopped directly in front of his father. He was breathing hard, his legs trembling from the effort, but he was standing on his own. "I did it, Dad," he whispered. "I climbed the mountain." Marcus pulled his son into his arms, lifting him off his feet, spinning him around the way he used to when Ethan was small. "You did it," Marcus sobbed. "You actually did it." The room erupted in cheers. Grace was crying. Victoria was crying. Even Bradley, who prided himself on professional composure, was wiping his eyes. But Ethan wasn't done. "Wait," he said, pulling back from his father's embrace. "There's more." He walked to the center of the room where a small table held something covered by a cloth. "I've been working on this for months," Ethan said. "It's for all of you, but especially for Mom." He pulled off the cloth. Underneath was a painting. It showed a mountain tall, impossibly steep, covered in snow. At the very top stood a small bear looking out over the world with triumph in his eyes. Behind him, barely visible in the clouds, was the figure of a woman. Her face was Claire's. Her smile was gentle. Her hands were raised as if she had been lifting the bear up the entire time. At the bottom of the painting, in careful letters, Ethan had written, "For the ones who carried me when I couldn't walk." Nobody spoke. Nobody could. Marcus stared at the painting, at his wife's face, at the bear that represented his son, at the message that captured everything words couldn't say. "Ethan?" His voice broke. "This is—" "I know you and Grace are getting married next month," Ethan said. "I wanted to give you something that had Mom in it, so she could be there too, so she could be part of the new family we're making." Grace crossed the room and knelt beside Ethan, her face streaming with tears. "She is part of this family," Grace said. "She always will be. She's the reason I'm here. She's the reason any of us are here." Ethan nodded. "I know. That's why I painted her at the top of the mountain. Because that's where she is now. Watching us. Cheering for us. He looked up at his father. She's proud of us, Dad. I know she is. Marcus couldn't speak. He just pulled his son close and held on the painting between them, Claire's face smiling down from the peak she had helped them all climb. The wedding was held 3 weeks later. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends gathered in the backyard of the Sterling mansion. The same backyard where Claire used to plant flowers. The same backyard where Ethan used to chase butterflies before the accident took his legs. Marcus stood at the altar, his heart pounding, watching Grace walk toward him on Victoria's arm. She was beautiful. Not in the flashy, dramatic way of magazine covers, but in the quiet, steady way of someone who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Her dress was simple. Her hair was pulled back, and she was wearing Claire's locket around her neck. When she reached him, Marcus took her hands and felt something settle in his chest. Peace. Real, lasting peace. I never thought I'd feel this way again, he said, his voice thick with emotion. After Claire died, I was certain my heart had died with her. I thought love was something that happened once and then was gone forever. Grace squeezed his hands. And now I understand that love doesn't die. It just changes. It grows. It finds new ways to exist. He glanced at Ethan, who was standing beside him as best man, beaming with pride. Claire sent you to us. She knew we needed you. And she was right. The officiant cleared his throat. Do you, Marcus Sterling, take Grace Mitchell to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Grace Mitchell, take Marcus Sterling to be your lawfully wedded husband? Grace's voice was steady. I do, with all my heart. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus kissed her, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. Ethan threw his arms around both of them, and for a moment the three of them just stood there, wrapped in each other, complete. But the day wasn't over. At the reception, Victoria clinked her glass and stood to give a toast. I've only been part of this family for a year, she began. And in that year, I've seen things I never thought possible. I've watched my nephew walk again. I've watched my new brother-in-law learn to love again. And I've watched a stranger become the heart of this household. She raised her glass toward Grace. Claire chose you. She saw something in you that the rest of us needed time to understand. And she was right, just like she was always right. Victoria's voice cracked. To Claire, for bringing us together, and to all of you, for letting me be part of something I thought I'd never have. To Claire, everyone echoed. Marcus felt the locket pressing against Grace's chest as he held her. Claire was here. She was always here, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a presence woven into every moment of their lives. After the reception, Ethan pulled Marcus aside. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think Mom would approve of Grace? Really approve, not just because she sent her, but because of who she is? Marcus thought for a moment. I think your mother would say that Grace has the kindest heart she's ever seen. I think she would say that anyone who could help her stubborn son walk again must be some kind of miracle worker. Ethan grinned. I'm not that stubborn. You're exactly that stubborn. You get it from her. Yeah. Ethan's smile softened. I miss her, Dad. Even with everything good that's happened, I still miss her every day. I know, son. So do I. Marcus put his arm around Ethan's shoulders. But missing someone doesn't mean we stop living. It means we carry them with us into every new chapter. Mom is part of this wedding. She's part of our family with Grace and Victoria. She's part of every step you take. Ethan leaned into his father. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know. 6 months after the wedding, Ethan started school again. Not homebound tutoring, not online classes. Real school with real kids walking through real hallways on his own 2 legs. Marcus drove him on the first day, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. You don't have to be so nervous, Ethan said. I'm the one going to school. I'm not nervous. Your hands are shaking. Marcus looked down and laughed. Okay, maybe I'm a little nervous. Dad, I've climbed a mountain. I've learned to walk again. I've survived you burning every meal you've ever tried to cook. I think I can handle 7th grade. It's different. These are kids your age. They can be mean, judgmental, I know. Ethan shrugged. But I'm not going to hide anymore. Mom wouldn't want that. Grace wouldn't want that. And honestly, I don't want it either. Marcus pulled into the school parking lot and turned to face his son. When did you get so brave? I've always been brave. Ethan grinned. I just forgot for a while. He opened the car door, grabbed his backpack, and stepped out. Then he paused and looked back. Dad. Yeah. Thanks for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. Before Marcus could respond, Ethan turned and walked toward the school. No cane, no hesitation, just a boy with a second chance ready to face whatever came next. Marcus watched until his son disappeared through the front doors. Then he broke down crying. Not from sadness, from pride, from gratitude, from the overwhelming miracle of watching his child choose life when death had seemed like the only option. He pulled out his phone and called Grace. He's in. Marcus said, his voice thick. He walked right in like he owned the place. Of course he did. Grace laughed through her own tears. He's a Sterling. Stubborn runs in the blood. And Mitchell now, too. And Mitchell. God help anyone who gets in his way. That night, Ethan came home with 3 party invitations and a phone number from a girl named Sophie, who thought his story was inspiring. Inspiring. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Is that what kids call it these days? Dad, please. I'm just saying, when I was your age, we called it, I'm going to my room now. We're having a conversation about dating safety. We're absolutely not. Ethan retreated up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, and Marcus realized with a start that he was running. Actually running like any other kid, like the son he used to have before the accident. Grace appeared beside him. He's going to be okay, isn't he? Yeah. Marcus pulled her close. I think he's going to be more than okay. 2 years to the day after the accident, the Sterling family gathered at Claire's grave. Marcus, Grace. Ethan and Victoria stood together, flowers in their hands, the morning sun warming their backs. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Ethan stepped forward. He was 12 now, taller than he'd been, his face losing the softness of childhood. He walked without any support, no cane, no walker, nothing but his own strength carrying him forward. Hi, Mom, he said softly. It's been a while. He knelt beside the headstone and traced his fingers over Claire's name. A lot has happened since the last time I was here. I can walk now, really walk, not just shuffle around. The doctor said it was impossible, but I guess I didn't get that memo. A small laugh escaped him. Dad got married again. To Grace, you remember Grace, right? The one you asked to look after us. Well, she did. She looked after us so well that Dad fell in love with her. He glanced back at his father. He's not as grumpy anymore. I mean, he's still pretty grumpy, but in a lovable way. Marcus smiled through his tears. I have an aunt now, too, Victoria. She's your sister Mom. Did you know that? I don't know if you knew that. But she's pretty cool. She tells me stories about you, about when you were a baby, about the family you came from. It helps me understand you better. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I painted a picture of you. It's hanging in the living room now. You're at the top of a mountain watching over us. That's where I think you are, not down here under the ground, but up there, cheering us on. His voice cracked. I miss you, Mom, every single day. Some days it hurts so bad I can barely breathe. But then I remember what you used to say, that love doesn't go away just because someone leaves. It changes form. It becomes memories and stories and the way we treat each other. He touched the headstone one more time. Your love changed form, Mom. It became Grace. It became Dad learning to trust again. It became me learning to walk. He stood up slowly. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure that love never dies." Marcus stepped forward and placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "Your mom would be so proud of you," he whispered. "She is so proud of you." "I know, Dad." Ethan smiled through his tears. "I can feel it." One by one, they laid their flowers on Claire's grave. Marcus was last. He stood there for a long moment, looking down at the name of the woman who had changed his life, first by loving him, then by leaving him, and finally by sending someone to save him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for Ethan, for Grace, for the life we're building." He touched the cold stone. "I'll take care of them, all of them, I promise." Then he turned, took Grace's hand, and walked back toward the car where his family was waiting. The sun was bright, the air was warm, and somewhere just beyond the edge of what he could see, Marcus felt Claire smiling. That evening, the family gathered in the living room for their weekly movie night. Ethan had picked the film, an animated movie about a bear who climbed a mountain. Grace had made popcorn without burning it, which everyone celebrated as a major accomplishment. Victoria had brought homemade cookies that were actually delicious. Marcus sat on the couch with Grace curled against his side, watching his son laugh at the cartoon bear's antics. The painting Ethan had made hung on the wall behind them, Claire's face watching over the scene with gentle approval. "Dad," Ethan said during a quiet moment in the movie. "Yeah. Do you remember when you used to watch everything through cameras?" Marcus felt his cheeks flush with old shame. "I remember." "Why did you stop?" Marcus considered the question. It deserved an honest answer. "Because I realized that watching isn't the same as seeing, and seeing isn't the same as being there." He pulled Grace closer. "The cameras made me feel safe, but they kept me distant. I was so afraid of losing you that I forgot to actually be with you." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm glad you stopped." "Me too, son. Me too." The movie continued, but Marcus wasn't really watching anymore. He was thinking about the journey from darkness to light, from isolation to connection, from death to life. 2 years ago, he had been a man hiding behind walls and lenses, convinced that control was the only protection against pain. He had pushed away everyone who tried to help, including the one person his wife had trusted to save them. Now, he was surrounded by love. His son was walking. His house was full of laughter. His heart was whole again. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because he had finally learned to let it transform. At midnight, after everyone else had gone to bed, Marcus walked through the house one last time. No cameras watched him. No monitors tracked his movements. Just empty hallways and quiet rooms full of memories and hope. He stopped outside Ethan's door and listened. Silence. Peaceful silence. The silence of a boy sleeping deeply, dreaming of mountains he had already climbed. He walked to the living room and stood before Ethan's painting. Claire looked down at him from the canvas, her smile eternal, her love preserved in every brushstroke. "We made it," Marcus whispered. "We actually made it." He touched the edge of the painting, feeling the texture Ethan had created with careful healing hands. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if any of this is real. The signs, the feelings, the sense that you're still with us." He took a breath. "But just in case you can, I want you to know we're okay. We're more than okay. We're happy." Tears rolled down his cheeks. "You were right about Grace. You were right about everything, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." He stepped back. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me Ethan. Thank you for sending her to save us." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'll see you someday, but not for a while. I've got too much left to do here." He turned off the light and climbed the stairs to the bedroom where Grace was waiting. She was already asleep, her face peaceful, Claire's locket resting against her heart. Marcus slipped into bed beside her and pulled her close. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments he couldn't predict or control. But he wasn't afraid anymore, because he had learned the truth that Claire had known all along. Love never dies. It just changes form. It becomes memories. It becomes hope. It becomes the hands that catch us when we fall, and the voices that remind us we can fly. Marcus Sterling closed his eyes and smiled. Outside, the stars burned bright. Inside, the house breathed with the gentle rhythm of a family at peace. And somewhere at the top of an impossible mountain, a little bear rested after the longest climb of his life, knowing that every step had been worth it. Because on the other side of grief, he had found something he never expected. He had found home. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that hope is never truly lost and love can find its way through the darkest moments, then stay with us. Subscribe to our channel, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the miracle isn't what we ask for. It's who walks in when we least expect it. Until next time, keep your heart open, keep climbing your mountain, and never forget that the people who love us never really leave. They just wait for us at the top.